Hi, this is going to be a critique of Rick's recent Castles and Crusades session. He is currently releasing that session as multiple episodes, but he was kind enough to provide the complete session so that I could analyze things further. I think this is going to be my last critique video for Rick, because I feel like I am going to be repeating myself constantly. The solutions that I am providing are not being applied. So if Rick ever wants to actually improve in his sessions, he only needs to watch my critique videos. The ones that I have, the one that I did before, the one that I am going to be doing now. It's always going to be the same thing. So, first I want to start with saying, Rick, your session is still, compared to the other fake role player sessions out there, it is better, but the bar is too low. It would be like saying, hey, you are tougher than the soy boy, right? You are tougher than the average soy boy. The bar is still too low. I was really disenchanted because when Rick first started to reveal, upload, release the different episodes, the first episode, it really got me enthusiastic because a lot of the things that happened in that first episode were great. That is the first 20 minutes of the session. 18 minutes, more or less. They were not perfect. I still had some criticisms, but there were, I would say, rather, being more precise, about 10 minutes of that session, give or take. About 10 minutes of that episode, give or take. Some parts actually had me clapping like this. Like they were doing it great, and then disaster struck. You can see in my comment of the first episode, I said that I identified two weak links. If we want to view things in a more generalized way, there was one huge glaring weak link: the game master. So let's proceed. When it comes to improvements in the case of Rick, the description was slightly better, but you will see how things collapsed in a few moments. And you can see in the faces of the players during the actual, that small part where when roleplay was flowing smoothly, they were really into the fiction. But then they were guys rolling dice and playing a game, forgetting the roleplay. Role-playing game, role-playing game, role-playing game. You cannot separate the two. If not, you're doing something else. It's not just about being a gamer. It's not just about being just a role player. It's a role-playing game. Okay. I have a question, an observation. Rick, why did you introduce a non-player character? Is he vital to the story? To the story that you tell after the session? Remember, this is role-playing. This is not telling a story about your characters. This is carrying actions in the present, in the now. Is he vital for the session in some way? Because when the non-player character was not talking, you could see an effort on the part of the participants engaging with each other, and I think the session could perhaps have been steered towards actual roleplay and immersion if that non-player character had not been around, and he didn't play like a huge major part. Do not, and this is an error of a certain, I don't even want to say who, do not use non-player characters as tour guides or as nannies or as proxies for the game master so that the players can ask questions to the non-player character, to obtain answers from the game master. The non-player characters should be characters that are alive and real within the fiction. They shouldn't serve as some sort of tool to communicate with the players, that is game master and players, using the non-player character as a telephone. It should be a real character with its own agendas, its own motives, etc. Take a look at the Ravenhawk campaign that I am currently running. Ismark and Irina, particularly Irina, they are vital to the story. To the ongoing story, again, that you can tell after role-playing, they are vital. Irina more so. Sometimes they actually fade a bit into the background. Sometimes they do their own actions. Sometimes they provide useful ideas. Sometimes they fight. But they are not there to serve as tour guides or as a means to communicate with the game master. They are part of the world. I have yet to finish the entire session. I saw enough, a bit more than the half of the session. So I wonder, is that non-player character really necessary? I also feel like every time that Rick went into non-player character mode, his description suffered from it, like he had a difficult time readjusting from pure description to role-playing a non-player character. Like he couldn't jump back from game master to non-player character, and vice versa. It turned into a conversational way. Okay, next point. Rick, I highly recommend that you practice by yourself some monologues in description and you eradicate, annihilate, completely destroy the basically and kinda. It's kinda like basically, it's kinda like basically, it's kinda like basic. That reveals a lack of confidence. It happens so many times. I wonder if it happens every time you are improvising. If you have to eliminate something about your description, the way that you describe things, eliminate the kinda, like'a, sorta, basically. Because you immediately go into a conversation, suddenly you see an archway. The wooden door within it is wide open or something, right? Perfect. Wow. Mm-hmm. So you kind of like see this. It's kind of like an archway with a somewhat. It kind of like. Okay, this is going to. You won't do it. I'm sure there are some disclaimer. There are some people in Rick's group that like to smoke one. Pot. Okay, I'm not going to say who. They are pretty open about it, but I'm not going to say who. Personal advice. Stop smoking that. Not even one. Not even one. Every single moment of stress, every single negative thing that you experience in life, you can recreate, produce the relaxation that you obtain by taking that drug that damages the brain. It makes you dull. It makes you forget things. It makes you forget things. It's not the age. It's not blah, blah, blah. It's that thing. It makes you forget about things. It keeps your mind dull. If you were to eliminate that, your roleplay would improve incredibly. I can tell you right now. But I've seen it countless times. You mention this, they won't do it. It keeps on going. Okay, putting that aside. Don't talk to the players. Describe. Practice, Rick. Practice third person. Let's say the character is, I forget the name. I'm going to say the names of the players. Josh. Josh moves down the stairs, and as soon as he steps upon the stone section, he hears a click. And then maybe for more emphasis, then you can say something like, the next step that you take, you hear another click, right? But I noticed, Rick, that every time you employed the use of you kind of like, it's kind of like, now it's not a role-playing game, it's not an adventure, it's not an experience where the players are living the actual module, the experience, the situation. Now it's a conversation between that game master that doesn't exist in the game world with the player. Back and forth conversation instead of back and forth description. living the adventure. Don't validate the I wanna, I'm gonna, I will. Don't answer out of character questions. Rick, you had 3 hours to say, 3 hours to say, you missed your turn. You were thinking about the future, you missed your turn. Or if it's not combat, you hesitated too much and you were not taking action. You are not taking action because you are hesitating too much. Instead of acting, you kept on thinking about the future. That's the message that you want to send to the players, to say, that is not correct. You are not role-playing. You are shattering immersion. Every time Max was asking a question, and we will get to Max in a few moments, instead of saying, Max is suddenly, the name of the character, I think it was Vernier. Vernier is speaking to no one in particular. Rick, you didn't even try. You had 3 hours. And not a single time. Even though you said, the next time my players do this, I am going to go full Abe on them. That's why I say I'm not going to continue giving tips, because you are not even trying. You are not even trying. So, no tips. That is in my final video. You're not applying the tips. This is my last try. You are not even trying. Rick, why don't you do it? Remember, I asked you the same question during the panel. Why don't you correct these things during the session through roleplay? Because Crispy said, but wouldn't that disrupt immersion? No, if you roleplay, no. This character is talking to no one in particular. No one is answering. This character is speaking alone in the room. You missed your turn as you hesitated thinking about the future. Do you think you're going to hurt their little feelings, Rick? Because you are going to make some corrections that were supposed to be agreed upon before the session? These are supposed to be adults, mature people. You are damaging them because instead of teaching them how to roleplay, you're telling them, yeah, go on. Just today, Tyler made a video about fun. The fun in tabletop role-playing games. Many imbeciles out there tell you that we're all having fun, it's all about having fun. Then why don't you have fun while role-playing? Because you don't know shit about role-playing. Tyler made a very good example. Painting miniatures. And there are a lot of idiots that just got into the hobby because they don't know how to roleplay, they have no interest in roleplay, but they saw the cool minis for the Dungeons and Dragons RPG and they want them. And so I am a role player now. Gary Gygax, the most non-role player of them all, because he was one of the 2 creators of Dungeons and Dragons, he never used miniatures when he roleplayed. Well, when he attempted to roleplay, because he was never a role player. He was a board gamer. Adventure. What do you do? Ask questions. Mother may I sort of player. And still he didn't use miniatures. Take a look at this in the different historical documents. Look for it in Dragon's Foot. Different books. Talk to Rob Kuntz if you can get to him, if he's available. Talk to his adoptive son, Rob Kuntz. No miniatures in their games. They kept on the miniatures to attract wargamers and imbeciles who only know how to paint miniatures, but they know nothing about role-playing games. They know nothing. They kept on pushing the miniatures to attract people, customers. And remember, I am not against using miniatures as long as you roleplay. Moving on from that. Yes, Rick, why? You didn't even try. And now your players, their roleplay have suffered. The roleplayer has suffered for it. The roleplay is distorted. Now they are mediocre in their roleplay under your game mastering. The game master is like the captain of a ship. You cannot, what's the technical term, commandeer a ship unless you have a crew. But the crew cannot work accordingly without someone giving directions, the captain. So you're basically a captain that, oh, the ship, the mast needs repairs, the flags, the sails. They let loose the anchor when it was unnecessary. You see? Oh, they are steering in that direction instead of that other one. Imagine how many shipwrecks. Imagine the session's shipwreck. Those first 10 minutes, incredible. You couldn't keep it up. It's better to play an hour or 2 hours at most with pure roleplay, advancing incredibly, that so you kind of see like it's kind of like basically, and then combat. Oh, the combat was a bit sluggish, but and that's I'm going to talk about why Big Bad RPG was asking questions. He made, I think it was 2 or 1 question in the part that I have seen. Only 1 question so far, and you will see why in a few moments. Compare the combat, Rick, with the Ravenhawk combats in the recent session of the Ravenhawk campaign. There was this moment where RPG Grandma was actually wrestling with these 2 blights. The Moo, the Minotaur, was wrestling really cool, and they were trying to get them off of her. They were countering their tendrils when they shot the tendrils against the adventurers. The adventurers started to hack and slash Eli. Really cool idea on the part of Eli when he started to use his sword to try to deflect or cut the vines that were being shot at him. And RPG Grandma followed his example and all of that. Every time that Big Bad RPG was using his shield and dodging, it's so incredible combat. And in this, oh, you hit. We will talk about combat in a moment. Well, let's address combat right now. It turned into a laugh fest. Oh, I got 3. Oh, bling, fail. And I was like, wow, it's like watching guys eating drinking beer and eating pretzels while playing medieval. You know, the most simple medieval or zombies, the plastic zombies game, the board game, that you're building the tiles and you're making rolls and making jokes. That's when another important sign that immersion was completely shattered. If you were there, you wouldn't be thinking, oh, I rolled this. No, I missed, because you are watching you are living the adventure. You are facing off against this foe. Just take a look when RPG Grandma and Eli and Big Bad RPG, there are still a few laughs every now and then, but they are still worried about their actions. Oh, they are even role playing how they are getting hit, damaged, injured. I really liked it, the part when the spell of the shockwave was used against the characters, and Moo, the Minotaur, RPG Grandma's character, was the only one affected, and she roleplayed because you have control. When you are being pushed back, you can wave your arms and because something pushed you, right? You are not in control of the scenario, but you are in control of your character's actions. So they were all role-playing their actions, and I thought it was really cool that as Moo was being shot away or pushed back, she roleplayed, So incredibly lively combat because everyone was in character, role-playing. Moving on from that. So yes, Rick, very weird. I don't know. Do you think your players are going to hate you? Is it too difficult for you? This plays into the Canadian meme. For those of you that do not know, there is this meme about Canada of the people trying to be too nice to everyone. Like the Canadians, they are never going to. But here's the thing. Sometimes by being too sweet or kind, you are causing more harm than good. In this case, the roleplay was distorted because you missed your turn as you were thinking about the future. It costs you nothing to make that, Rick. I cannot believe it. Okay. When Mr. Max got disconnected, you shouldn't say, oh, let's wait for him to come back. No, 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 no. Take a look at the Dark and Terrible campaign. When I got disconnected, the game master got disconnected. Imagine that. What could be considered the focus of the flow. He's the one presenting the encounters, the adventure itself. And I got disconnected. What did Josh do? He roleplayed. He started to roleplay his character talking to Crispy, and Crispy followed suit. And they roleplayed. They roleplayed the entire, like, what was it, like 2 or 3 minutes that I was disconnected until I came back. Roleplay solves everything. Thankfully, Big Bad RPG was there, and he said, no, he was an error, but you can excuse this error because, or maybe he was telling the group that, maybe that's it. He said, I'm going to look for traps. Maybe he was telling the other ones, I'm going to look for traps. And he rescued that part of the session. Big Bad RPG rescued that issue with the disconnection, with the connection problems, because he roleplayed. But Rick, you were like, oh, let's wait for him. No. Okay. Talking to player characters via character names. Every time, Rick, that you said Vernier, and you started to have a conversation with the player. Rain, and you start to have a conversation with the player. No, Rick, no. It's much better to say Rain accomplishes this. Vernier identifies this. Maybe later on you can go into you, but because, Rick, every time you use you and you go into a conversation, you should practice finding more distance between you and the player characters. This player character does this. This player character smells this. This player character can see. And maybe in some moments, to put more emphasis in some things, you notice that. You perceive that. You accomplish, etc. But don't talk to the players directly. Hey, Rain, almost like a teacher. Rain, I'm here, teacher, present. Okay, Vernier, I'm here, teacher. Okay. Let's see. Yes, and you can see the entire session suffers for it. For if you don't address these things, the entire session suffers for it. The beautiful 10 minutes that started, I was pulled into it. I was like, I felt as if I was almost there, almost, but not entirely, because I was passive. That is, I was just a spectator. Unlike a role player, I was a spectator. But they had the free will to do whatever they wished within the fiction. But still, I was being drawn, pulled into the session because of those beautiful 10 minutes of roleplay. And then roleplay thrown under the bus completely. Okay. Sometimes it felt a bit like you were rushing things, Rick. Like the characters were just describing something, and then you immediately see, and you started to give so many details. I would recommend that you wait a little to see what actions they take. Now, moving on from Rick, Big Bad RPG. When I heard Big Bad RPG said, oh no, El Jaguar is going to kill me because I made an out-of-character question, but I see why it happened. Okay, let's move carefully. I think this was a confusion. Perhaps it was due to a tweak in the rule system. Whatever the case may be, Big Bad RPG was stabbing with his rapier, I think, and he said something like, oh, do I need to add my dexterity to it? Well, because it was happening, I think it happened during the roll, so it's not as bad. It's not as disruptive, but it was still a bit disruptive. So I wonder, Big Bad RPG actually he puts great emphasis on this in his chart. Read the book. Read the book if you want to understand how to play the system of a tabletop role-playing game. Read the book. So I find it difficult to think that perhaps Big Bad RPG didn't read that section. It's also important to consider that Big Bad RPG is recovering from a certain heart or blood pressure condition. I'm not exactly sure. So he cannot spend too many hours in front of the computer. Sometimes he needs to go to sleep. to recover, etc. So he was not exactly 100% there, but he was still trying his best to roleplay. So that could have affected his performance as well. I would recommend the next time a Big Bad RPG, if you want to obtain that sort of information, you could say something like, as I stab with my rapier, I consider if my dexterity will inflict damage as well. Like, hint, hint. Game master, wink, wink, hint, hint. Like, give me that information because I don't know. And the game master is going to pick up on the situation and going to tell you this or that. So yes, I think the question could have been avoided. It wasn't exactly horribly disruptive because it happened during the roll. But if you want to preserve it, go that extra mile to keep the immersion going, because otherwise every single action a player is going to ask, do I need to add my strength to that? Is my proficiency adding a bonus to that? And disrupts the roleplay. So yes, it was an error, but and here's the other thing that I'm going to mention. I have said this in another video. There is a domino or even snowball effect when people do not roleplay. I'm getting really hungry. I think I'm going to eat after this video. But okay. If you disrupt roleplay, the other players are going to be affected by that. And Rick, the game master, is vital to this. Because you started to validate, I will, and you started to have conversations with your players, and you started to answer every out-of-character question that Max did. Rick, the weakest link, Rick, the game master, in this case. You were the weakest link. So, Big Bad RPG, sometimes even role players get influenced by this. I also saw this in RPG's Dumb session of Rifts. There was this part, they were playing with this horrible, terrible role player, the bald guy, kept going out of character, asking questions. Big Bad RPG did not address that. No, sorry, RPG's Dumb did not address those out of character things. The domino effect, the snowballing effect happened. And when Big Bad RPG was first role playing during that session, at the start of the session, suddenly when they got into the elevator, by then he was already out of character, making jokes, out of character. So it has a domino effect. It's like an infection. When you disrupt roleplay, shatter immersion, it has an effect on everyone at the table. And who can stop that? Who is the only one capable, responsible? Because this is part of the responsibilities and the duties of the game master. Who is responsible for that? The game master. And Rick, you are not responsible. You are not taking responsibility. I think that's a major issue. That's why you are pretty good when it comes to role-playing as a player character, but not as a game master, because the player character has less responsibilities when it comes to the game master. You need to be responsible, Rick. You need to be held accountable for the disruption of this role-play session. Okay, moving on. I think Big Bad RPG was doing a great job assisting Rick. There were some pauses, some lulls in the action, and Big Bad RPG roleplayed. He started to, you could say he was one of the driving forces of the group. The other driving force was Mr. Max, but in the wrong way. I will tell you how in a few moments. There were a few moments where Big Bad RPG, like I said, he got infected by the non-roleplay, by the fake roleplay rather. And he started to say, I'm gonna run my hand across the wall. There were like a couple of instances, and I was like, oh no. Because when you see a role player doing that, you think, what is going on with this session? That a role player is actually going into that. There were some other times that he said, I will go, but perhaps he was talking to someone else. Could be. Moving on. Josh, he needs to get his hands out of his mouth. You know, I'm going to. There is some sort of tick where Josh cannot get his hands, and I'm going. And he kept on. I'm gonna, I will. The camera was better, but I'm gonna, I will, I'm gonna, I'm gonna, I will, I'm gonna, I'm gonna. I cannot believe, again, stop smoking pot. Stop smoking pot. I cannot believe. And this is me. Perhaps Josh doesn't even smoke that, right? But this is me falling into the error or mistake, perhaps, of thinking that perhaps he's smoking one of those, because how many times has Josh, how many times has Josh heard that it is incorrect to say I'm gonna, I wanna, I will, and he's still doing it? This again, the fault of Rick. Rick, do you remember in the gratuitous anime gratuitous anime gimmick session, the campaign, where Kevin was, I'm gonna, I will, oh Kevin, this is why you must learn roleplay before talking. Before the session, Kevin was, in order to teach people how to roleplay, you should teach them as if they were playing a board game first. And I was like, no, teach them as a role-playing game. No, I can see the merit of those two methods. No, Kevin, you saw it in the first session. If you don't teach people how to roleplay, do not teach them a role-playing game, rather. Do not practice roleplay separately. Do not practice the game separately. Do not practice a board game. Practice role-playing in the session, in the now, in the moment, in the actual play. Be it with your friends at the physical table, be it online. You roleplay. A role-playing game, not a game, not a roleplay, not a play that is rolled, that is role-played. Both unified. Role-playing game. So, when it comes to Josh, Rick, you kept on validating his non-roleplay, and so Josh thinks, oh, it is okay. It's okay for me to keep on disrupting the session. The moment all of that started, the immersion was completely shattered, and my admiration for the 10 minutes turned into disappointment. Okay. Now, I would recommend that if Josh wants to step out of his chair and do something, that he turns off his camera. No one wants to see your ass in pajamas. It's very disruptive. Just like in my sessions, I always tell them, there were perhaps a couple of mistakes. I tell them, when you want to step away, turn off your camera so that people don't see like an empty chair where the character should be, or whatever. Turn off the camera, and then perfect, the immersion keeps on going, but then it is distracting the people. The illusion is broken. Suddenly the person that was trying to roleplay using gestures and words, now there is like this empty chair. But when you turn off your camera, there is, because it is neutral, a blank screen, nothing really comes to mind. But then you see a guy in his pajamas walking around the room and showing his ass, like. And I don't think women will be watching that video for Josh's ass, okay? So that's not going to get any more views, okay? And that's my personal opinion. Maybe Josh has had some pretty good results showing his ass with someone, but no, I don't think the ladies will like that, especially in pajamas. Pajamas are not exactly attractive, so it was very disruptive for the session. Okay, now. Spence. Spencer, your roleplay fluctuated so much. Sometimes you were doing it right, and then I'm gonna, and then you started to lose a lot of the initiative when it comes to role playing. Not in the initiative in the combat sense, but instead of actually taking action, that being a bit more active, participating in the session, sometimes you were a bit too passive. And yes, it was a bit disruptive that sometimes you were doing it great. Maybe you got careless, Spence, maybe you thought, oh, in the previous session I did great, and now overconfidence, and now you fell into I'm gonna. Now, moving on to Mr. Max. Now, I have to think Rick, did you actually tell Mr. Max how to roleplay? Did you show him my beginner's guide to roleplay, or is Max a master of roleplay and he is unable to watch that actual beginner's guide to roleplay, or how to obtain details through roleplay? Because, okay, Max was constantly asking questions out of character to the game master, and sometimes he went like, I take a look at the door. Is there a trap in the door? Like, kind of like can I see like a hazard or something? And Rick, once again, why do you validate these things, Rick? As Vernier examines the door, he suddenly starts to ask questions to no one in particular. Even if perhaps, I'm not exactly sure on the sides of Canada, but perhaps even if Mr. Max grew up speaking French, and later on he learned English. Even if you are very clumsy, if you were to be super clumsy in your English, just go for it. The game master is going to understand. If you have to say something like, I examined the door to see traps, to find traps, you know, a clumsy way, like you don't know how to say it in English correctly, the game master will play along with it. Will say, you make your roll, and depending on the result, as you examine the door, you notice that there is no mechanism or hazard present on the surface or something, you know? Kind of like that. And again, I am thinking perhaps Max didn't get the correct explanation how to roleplay. He constantly kept going from attempting to roleplay to ask questions. Sometimes with his dialogue, Mr. Max, you cannot tell if his character is speaking, and when he is describing, it would be worth it if he were to make a few pauses between description and dialogue, something like, I climb up the stairs. Hey guys, come take a look at this. You kind of like see the distinction, right? Or you could say, I climb up the stairs, I climb up the ladder, and then I say, or rather, I climb up the ladder, and wait for the game master to tell you what you see up there, and then you speak. Or if you're doing something quite simple like, I walk towards the wall and say, follow me, I think there is a secret passageway here. Ambiguous descriptions on the part of Max. So that I'm looking at the door to see if kind of like if there is some sort of thing, you know, like traps and whatnot, and you see like you're not talking to the game master, you're describing your actions. The game master doesn't exist. The game master is gone. The game master never existed. You are in a fantasy world. And through the description of your actions, because you cannot do that in the present, in the now, from your chair, you are describing your actions. That's it. Because that's what you are doing in the fictional world. You don't need to see, kind of like to say, so kind of like look for these things that are kind of like moving on from that. There were many instances of out of character laughter. Like I said, sometimes some situations are really funny, but a lot of laughter on the part of Max. Maybe you could laugh in character to keep on the immersion, or try to contain the laughter a bit, because they were in the fight and a three and there is laughter in sessions, it is inevitable, but constantly like and suddenly beer and pretzels, let's play a board game, beer and pretzels board game right now, and immersion shattered. Sometimes Mr. Max made some very overcomplicated descriptions of his actions. One action at a time. He would say something like, so I walk and examine if the corridor is safe, and then I walk forward, and then I look back, and I say, no, one action at a time. No, don't multitask many things, because you don't know exactly what will happen between each action. You can see that Rick, sometimes he held back. He was going to say something, but because you were carrying out too many actions, and Rick, you should have done something. While you were taking too many actions at the same time, you trip, then you fall. You see? Make those... that has to be a sort of penalty, Rick. or they will keep on doing it. Players will fall into their comfort zone even if it disrupts the roleplay, even if immersion is shattered. One step at a time. Examine this, approach this, open this, and then if something happens, you turn around and you tell the other players, hey, as simple as that. Try to don't make it too complicated. It's funny, right? In the quest for being complacent, you actually complicate things. What other thing? Too many actions at once, wanting too many details at once on the part of Mr. Max. Like, it's kind of like those players that I move through the corridor and I start to look at the left wall, and then I want to look at the right wall, and then I want to look at the ceiling, and then I want to pull out my 10-foot pole and start pole. No. Find a more elegant way of doing things. For example, let's say that I want to roleplay that I'm going to knock on the doors of those houses asking for the whereabouts of an individual. Instead of saying, I approach this door, knock on the door, and you roleplay each knock on the door, you say, I knock on the door of every house in that block asking for the whereabouts of this person. That's a good way of handling it. In the case of the dungeon exploration, I walk through the corridor, paying close attention at the walls and the ceiling while poking the floor with my 10-foot pole. Elegant. And because it is such a generalized action, it is not a certain thing. Specific actions, precise actions, should be rewarded. Perhaps you want a character almost completely focused on the dangers that could come from above. Then he's going to get an automatic spot, no check required, if the enemy, there is a reasonable chance of that character seeing the enemy above. Generalized actions give you a reasonable chance of succeeding, but they are not going to be as good as precise actions. Okay, moving on. And in some cases, not even that. There is a certain... Yes, in the case of Max, I would recommend that he eliminates the after I do this, I do that. After I say this other thing. After I do this, one action at a time. So I'm kind of suspicious. I wonder, did Max got a proper explanation on how to roleplay? I would recommend to anyone that is watching this and wants to know how to roleplay, please check out the videos in the description of this video. A true beginner's guide to roleplay and how to obtain details through roleplay. Because Max, if you're going to actually roleplay, don't say, I look at the door to, is there like a hazard or is there like a strange marking? I examine the surface of the door looking for strange markings. Or I run my hand across the door. Or I run my hand across the wall to see if there is a difference in the texture. Maybe you find like a nook, right? Or a cranny or something. Everything can be obtained through roleplay. You don't need to ask questions to the game master. And Rick, despite all of the flaws that I have mentioned of all of the participants, this is all because of you, Rick. You did nothing. You had 3 hours and you did nothing. Okay. Like I said, this is going to be my last critique of Rick's sessions. I'm going to be going on a loop, repeating myself over and over, because I just already saw that Rick is not interested in applying that. He said he was going to go Abe on them. He not even once. So Rick, if you ever need like, oh, how can I improve my sessions? Take a look at this video. It's going to, the same criticisms are going to apply over and over until they are corrected. As always, thank you for watching my videos. I am straight and to the point. I am not trying to protect people's feelings. I am giving you, hey, this is how you can do it. If it helps you, apply it. If not, discard it. I already saw that you discarded many of the things that I said that you shouldn't do. or that you should do. I hope this video was helpful nonetheless. Thank you to everyone for watching my videos. Thanks to everyone for their likes and their comments, their questions, etc. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know. And thank you so much to those of you that are going the extra mile to support the channel. If anyone else wishes to further support the channel, the information on how to do that will be in the description below. And remember, it is better to roleplay and fail in character than not to roleplay and fail as a player. Once again, thank you, and see you later.